They thought firing me would be the end of the story. They were wrong. My name is Cameron Blake, and what happened in that boardroom 3 days ago changed everything. But to understand how a 25-year veteran got publicly humiliated, then turned the tables on a Fortune 500 CEO, you need to know about the silver pen in my pocket and the phone call that happened 72 hours earlier. Let me start at the moment it all went sideways. The red tulips sat steady in my grip as I waited outside the conference room. Simple gesture, I told myself. A bouquet to welcome Adrienne Cross, the new CEO. 25 years at Meridian Corporation had taught me that respect mattered more than titles. I wanted her first morning to feel like she was joining a family, not just a company. But the moment I stepped inside, the air shifted. Adrienne didn't smile. She didn't glance at the flowers. Instead, she adjusted her tie and said with a clarity that pierced the room, "Cameron Blake, your time here is over." The words didn't register at first. Around the table, two freshly promoted vice presidents sat stiff, their pens poised as if waiting for me to argue. I looked at Adrienne, waiting for the hint of a smirk. Some sign this was a tasteless joke. It wasn't. She slid a manila envelope across the polished wood, her eyes flat, already dismissing me. My brain refused to process the information. 25 years of midnight calls, supply chain rescues, audits survived. All collapsed into a single cruel moment. No acknowledgement, no thank you, just a surgical cut. The humiliation deepened when she leaned forward, voice carrying so the entire room could hear. "This," she declared, tapping the envelope with a manicured finger, "is the beginning of cultural reform. Meridian must shed its relics to survive, and Cameron's departure will be our signal of change." Gasps rippled through the silence. I felt every eye on me, not with respect but with pity. My gift of tulips drooped in my arms, suddenly ridiculous. I set them down on the side table, their fragrance heavy in the stale air. If you love stories about corporate underdogs who refuse to stay down, and the sweet justice that comes when experience meets arrogance, hit that like button and subscribe right now. Every day brings brand new stories, each one more thrilling than the last. I reached for the envelope. My fingers brushed the engraved pen I always carried, the one given to me on my 25th anniversary. My name etched in silver glinted faintly under the fluorescent light. I clenched it tight, grounding myself against the tidal wave of humiliation. But here's what Adrienne didn't know. Here's what nobody in that room knew. 2 days earlier, I had signed papers that made me the majority owner of the company she thought she controlled. Adrienne straightened, satisfied, believing she had staged a spectacle. She had no idea this scene would not be remembered as her triumph. It would be remembered as the spark. 2 days before the humiliation, my phone rang late on a quiet Sunday evening. I almost ignored it. I had been trying to lose myself in a book, anything to silence the worry that came with the rumors of a new CEO. But the name flashing across the screen froze me. Theodore Hartwell. Theodore was not just the founder of Meridian Corporation. To many of us, he was the company itself. He had retired years earlier, weary of endless battles with investors. Yet his presence still lingered in the marble hallways. When Theodore called, you answered. "Cameron," his voice was steady, deliberate, the voice of a man who rarely wasted words. "I need to see you." Minutes later, I was seated in his oak-paneled study, the smell of old leather and tobacco clinging to the air. Theodore sat behind his desk, a stack of papers neatly arranged in front of him. His eyes, though, still carried that sharpness I remembered from the crisis years, when he seemed to see 10 moves ahead of everyone else. He pushed the papers toward me. "I've decided it's time to hand this company's future to someone who has earned it." I blinked, unsure I had heard correctly. "Theodore, you mean—" "Yes," he cut in, leaning back. "I am selling my remaining shares, 42%, to you." The words didn't sink in right away. I had spent my entire career fighting to keep this company afloat, never once imagining I could own even a fraction of it. My pulse quickened, a calculated assessment of possibilities. This was either salvation or the most elaborate corporate trap in history. Theodore reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a silver pen. He held it carefully, almost ceremonially, before placing it in my hand. "This was mine when I signed Meridian's founding documents," he said. "It is more than a pen. It is a symbol of trust. If you sign these papers, Cameron, you're not just an employee anymore. You're the guardian of what this company stands for." I stared at the pen, its weight pressing into my palm. My name would be written into the company's foundation, not as a caretaker, but as an owner. "Why me?" I asked quietly. "Because," Theodore replied, his tone low and measured, "I've watched the board circle like vultures. I know who is loyal to Meridian and who is loyal only to themselves. You've sacrificed more than anyone, sometimes too much, and I trust that loyalty." My throat tightened. I felt the final pieces of a plan clicking into place. Theodore had been right. Sometimes you had to wait to see people's true nature. Yet as I signed my name, the silver pen gliding across the page, Theodore's gaze hardened. "One more thing," he said. "We will keep this quiet for now. I want to see who reveals their true nature when they believe you have no power. Their arrogance will expose them. And when the time comes, you will not just defend yourself, you will decide the future of this company." That's when I knew this wasn't just about ownership. It was about watching people show who they really were when they thought nobody was keeping score. And what I learned over the next 48 hours would change everything. 2 days later, Adrienne Cross would walk into Meridian thinking she was in control. She had no idea that the signature already written in silver ink had made her the intruder. I returned to my office the morning after Adrienne's announcement, carrying an empty box instead of the tulips. The walk down the corridor felt longer than usual, the weight of silence pressing from every direction. Conversations stopped when I passed, not out of malice, but from the awkward sorrow that comes when people know they are witnessing something unjust and can do nothing to stop it. Inside my office, the blinds were half drawn, casting pale lines of light across the familiar desk where I had spent most of my adult life. I set the box down and began to gather my things. Framed photographs of successful project completions, worn binders of crisis reports that had saved millions. The coffee mug chipped on one side, but precious because it had seen me through countless overnight shifts. A small bronze paperweight, a gift from the Portland dock workers after I helped them through the strike of 2018. The worn leather portfolio that had traveled with me to 3 continents. Through the glass walls, I caught glimpses of my colleagues. Some tried to look away quickly. Others didn't bother hiding the sadness in their eyes. I recognized that look. It was pity mixed with helplessness. The kind of expression I had once seen on dock workers when a shipment went under inspection, knowing no amount of effort could reverse the delay. As I folded a jacket that had hung on the back of my chair for years, memories pressed in. Nights spent alone in airports, sleeping upright in plastic chairs while waiting for customs officials. Dawn phone calls to reroute trucks after a driver strike. And the memory that still ached most, the day my father was buried. I could see it clearly. Standing in the war room of the operations center, maps and red markers covering the walls. A blizzard had shut down shipping lanes, threatening to destroy a multi-million-dollar delivery. I stayed, directing logistics like a general at war, convincing myself that saving the company justified missing the funeral. I never forgave myself for that choice, but I wore it quietly, a scar invisible to everyone but me. Now, looking at the faces outside my office, I wondered if anyone truly knew the cost. The boardroom could erase me with a single letter, yet the sacrifices I carried were carved into me permanently. Oddly, there was pride in that thought. My name might not be on the building, but its foundation was built with pieces of my life. I slid the last folder into the box and paused. My phone buzzed. A message flashed across the screen from Daniel Morrison, one of the longest-serving managers in supply chain. A man who had weathered every storm at my side. His words were simple. "No one here has forgotten you, Cameron. Not now, not ever." The quiet pride swelled in me, dulling the sting of humiliation. Nostalgia wrapped itself around the moment like a bittersweet cloak. I wasn't leaving empty-handed. I was leaving with the knowledge that my sacrifices had been seen, remembered, and respected by those who mattered most. But what happened next would prove that sometimes the people who remember your worth aren't the ones sitting in boardrooms making decisions. Sometimes they're the ones who work beside you, who've seen what you're really made of when everything's on the line. By Thursday morning, the walls of Meridian were already echoing with a new rhythm, a colder one. I wasn't in the executive conference room, but word travels fast in corporate hallways. Adrienne Cross was holding her first full meeting with the senior leadership team, and her performance was designed to leave a mark. I heard later from one of my colleagues that she strode into the room as if she owned not just the company, but everyone sitting around that long glass table. She wasted no time on courtesy. "We're no longer in the era of sentiment," she began, pacing deliberately, her voice sharp enough to slice through hesitation. "This company has carried too much old infrastructure for too long." The phrase stung even when it reached me secondhand. Old infrastructure, that was me. Her not-so-subtle label for 25 years of service, reduced to a rusty pipe in her shiny new blueprint. She didn't just dismiss my contributions. She insulted every late night, every crisis survived, every ounce of loyalty I had poured into keeping Meridian alive. My chest tightened, anger rising like a flame that had been smothered too long. I could accept being replaced, but being erased, that was contempt I could not forgive. Adrienne pressed on, her tone swelling with arrogance. "We will cut deeper," she announced. "Departments bloated with sentimentality will be streamlined. Risk management, compliance, logistics, they will be rebuilt from the ground up. Loyalty to outdated methods is no longer acceptable. Her words were a knife, but the deeper wound came from the compliance in the room, the silence of those who knew better yet chose safety over dissent. And then, a twist of fate I hadn't expected. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message from a young analyst I had mentored years earlier. He had been in the meeting, notebook open, quietly recording on his phone. Attached was an audio file. "Cameron," his note read, "you might want this. They shouldn't get away with it." I pressed play. Adrienne's voice filled my apartment, dripping with disdain. "Old infrastructure," she sneered. "Relics like Cameron were anchors weighing us down. We will make his departure a symbol." The recording was clear, damning, impossible to spin as anything but contempt. My grip tightened around the phone. Anger coursed through me, but alongside it came a steady, cold focus. This wasn't just humiliation anymore. It was evidence. Adrienne had given me the very weapon I might one day use to expose her, a blade forged from her own arrogance. For the first time since my dismissal, I allowed myself a thin smile. She thought she had silenced me. Instead, she had handed me her own words, and words have a way of echoing longer than power. But what Adrienne didn't know was that while she was busy burning bridges and making enemies, the man she'd just insulted now held the keys to her kingdom. Friday morning arrived heavy with expectation. The board of directors gathered in the executive conference suite, a room designed to intimidate. Polished mahogany table that stretched nearly 20 feet, floor-to-ceiling windows that framed downtown Portland like a corporate painting. Leather chairs arranged with military precision. At the far end of that long table sat a chair unlike the others. A simple placard rested in front of it, printed in bold. Reserved, majority shareholder. The sight of it drew subtle glances. Some directors tried to mask their curiosity, sipping coffee as if uninterested, while others leaned ever so slightly, whispering speculation. The title carried weight. A new majority shareholder could shift the balance of every vote, alter the company's future with a single decision. And yet, the seat remained empty. Adrienne Cross, standing at the head of the table, noticed those glances but chose to spin the silence into her own narrative. With a confident smirk, she tapped her notes and said smoothly, "You'll be pleased to know the new investor aligns fully with my vision for reform. Their absence today is simply a formality. Consider it a silent endorsement of the changes we are putting in place." The words were designed to calm the room, but unease lingered. Directors exchanged measured looks, balancing skepticism with caution. It was true that investors often operated from behind the scenes, but the deliberate reservation of a chair with a nameplate announcing ownership was unusual. It carried the promise of presence, of someone who would eventually claim it. I wasn't there yet. I waited outside, just beyond the frosted glass doors. My hand brushed the silver pen in my pocket, the one Theodore had given me when I signed the papers. The weight of it grounded me, reminding me of the choice I had made 2 days earlier. My dismissal was still raw, but inside that room sat the stage for something larger than humiliation. I took a deep breath, crossed my arms, and pulled my shoulders back. It was time to show them who really held control. For now, suppression was necessary. Every instinct in me wanted to storm into that room immediately, strip away Adrienne's arrogance. But I had learned that patience was the most powerful weapon. Inside, Adrienne continued her presentation, gesturing at slides filled with forecasts and charts. Her voice carried the confidence of a woman certain of her dominance. "This company will no longer cling to outdated structures," she declared. "We are moving leaner, sharper, faster." Through the frosted glass, I could make out silhouettes shifting, voices rising and falling in the rhythm of corporate theater. Adrienne's voice cut through it all, sharp, confident, completely unaware that her words were sealing her own fate. And yet, even as she spoke, one director leaned toward another, his voice barely audible but cutting through the quiet like a secret. Who exactly is supposed to sit in that chair? The question lingered, unanswered, but heavy enough to settle over the room. The anticipation swelled. No one there could have known that the silence outside the glass doors was mine, and that when I chose to enter, everything they thought they knew would change. Keep watching to see what happens when 25 years of quiet patience meets corporate arrogance head-on. The air outside the boardroom felt colder than the air inside. I stood in the hallway, my dress shoes planted firmly on the marble floor. The silver pen clutched in my hand. The weight of it was steady, almost reassuring. Yet my pulse betrayed me, beating a little too fast, as if it knew what was about to unfold. Behind the frosted glass doors, muffled voices rose and fell. The board was settling in, and Adrienne Cross's voice was the loudest of all. "Today marks the beginning of a new era for Meridian Corporation," she boomed. I could hear the cadence even through the barrier, a salesman's rhythm, practiced to sound like inevitability. We're restructuring top to bottom. Deadweight will be trimmed. Inefficiencies eliminated. We're no longer bound by the past. Her confidence bled through the walls, a sound as sharp as glass. Inside, directors nodded, or at least pretended to. They had learned quickly that Adrienne rewarded visible allegiance. I adjusted my grip on the pen. Theodore had pressed it into my hand only days earlier, his eyes steady, his voice low. "This is more than ink, Cameron. It's a promise." The memory steadied me. Still, I could feel tension rising like static along my skin. Timing was everything. I couldn't step inside too soon. From my vantage point, I could see the secretary pacing back and forth, shuffling papers with nervous energy. She carried a folder thick with documents. New filings, I guessed. Her eyes darted toward the glass doors, then to her phone, then back to the folder as though something weighed on her. When Adrienne paused for a sip of water, the secretary slipped inside, handing her the folder with a whisper that wasn't as quiet as she intended. The ownership filings were updated this morning. I watched through the frosted glass as Adrienne's posture stiffened for half a second. The rhythm of her presentation faltered. I watched her fingers tighten on the folder's edge, her knuckles whitening for just a fraction of a second before she forced that practiced smile back into place. For a brief moment, unease flashed across her face, the mask cracking, but then she snapped the folder shut and forced a grin. As I was saying, she continued, her voice louder now, almost defiant, "Our path forward is clear. The new investor aligns with me completely. Their interests are my interests. There's nothing to worry about." The directors nodded again, but their eyes betrayed them. They had noticed her hesitation. The words hadn't landed the way she wanted. In the hallway, I exhaled slowly. My moment was approaching, but not yet. I had to let her arrogance climb higher. Let her feel untouchable. Only then would the fall cut deep enough to be remembered. I tucked the pen into my palm, its cool surface grounding me. The tension in the air was no longer mine alone. It seeped under the doors, coiling around the men and women seated at that table, wrapping itself tighter with every confident word Adrienne spoke. She thought she was in control. She thought the chair at the end of the table belonged to an ally. She thought the filings didn't matter. Soon, she would discover how wrong she was. Inside the boardroom, the hum of agreement grew louder. Adrienne's voice carried with the ease of a woman who believed the hardest part was already behind her. She stood tall at the head of the table, pacing slowly as though each director belonged to her already. "Progress demands boldness," she declared, gesturing to the slides projected on the wall. "We have already begun the process of trimming the fat. With your votes today, we make it official. Together, we're writing the future of Meridian." A few directors leaned back in their chairs, nodding, their expressions cautious but compliant. One, then another, voiced support. "I think Adrienne is right," one said. "We need a clean break from the past." A second chimed in. "Efficiency is the only way forward." Relief washed across Adrienne's face. The tightness in her shoulders softened, and her stride became almost triumphant. For the first time that morning, she allowed herself the smile of a woman who believed victory was hers. From the hallway, I watched the silhouettes shifting through the frosted glass. The cadence of voices inside told me enough. Adrienne had swayed them. My chest tightened. Each passing second felt like sand slipping too quickly through an hourglass. Maybe I was too late, I thought. Maybe signing those papers, gripping Theodore's silver pen with steady hands, had been nothing more than a symbolic gesture. Perhaps the company was already lost to Adrienne's arrogance and the board's willingness to bend under it. My fingers clenched the pen in my pocket, its smooth surface digging into my skin. Doubt pressed heavy against my ribs. I imagined the directors raising their hands in agreement, Adrienne gathering the votes she needed, the legacy I had fought for, sealed under her careless leadership. Inside, Adrienne leaned forward, voice rich with satisfaction. "Let's proceed," she said confidently. A show of hands. But before the first arm could rise, the secretary hurried in, breathless, holding her phone aloft. "You need to see this," she announced, her voice cracking the tension like glass breaking. Confusion rippled around the table. Devices lit up as directors reached for their tablets and phones. Adrienne frowned, irritation flashing across her face at the interruption. Then her expression faltered as she read. On every screen, the message was the same: notification of ownership change. As of Tuesday morning, Cameron Blake holds 42% of voting shares in Meridian Corporation. This update supersedes all prior records. Effective immediately, board recognition of ownership is required. The room fell silent. Chairs creaked as directors shifted, eyes widening, scanning the words again as though disbelief could alter them. Adrienne's relief evaporated in an instant, replaced by the pale stiffness of a woman whose ground had shifted beneath her. Out in the hallway, I exhaled. The weight of doubt lifted just enough to let something else through. Resolve. The game wasn't over. It was only beginning. The silence in the boardroom was suffocating when I finally pushed the door open. The frosted glass swung wide and every head turned as my dress shoes struck the polished floor. I didn't rush. I walked with the steady rhythm of someone who belonged, though not a single person in that room had expected me to appear. In my right hand, the silver pen caught the light, glinting like a small blade. I let it rest at my side as though I had carried it there my entire life. The pen was no longer just a gift from Theodore. It was a reminder that my signature carried more weight than Adrienne Cross's entire performance that morning. Adrienne froze mid-sentence, her eyes widening for a fleeting second. Her mask cracked and the boyish panic underneath flickered through. This is a mistake," she stammered, clutching at the folder in front of her. Her voice wavered, no longer the booming cadence of authority, but the brittle tone of a woman scrambling to hold on. I didn't speak. Not yet. Instead, I stood still, letting the silence work in my favor. My gaze locked on Adrienne's, unblinking, calm as steel. Around us, the directors shifted, uncomfortable, waiting for the storm they sensed was about to break. Adrienne tried again, louder this time, forcing false confidence into her words. The SEC filing must be an error. Blake was terminated. He has no standing here. But the tremor in her voice betrayed her. Still, I said nothing. I let the weight of my presence press into the room, a pressure that grew heavier with each passing second. The directors leaned back, some glancing between us, others lowering their eyes. They could feel it too, that the balance of power had shifted even before a single word was spoken. Finally, I took one slow step forward. The pen glinted again. I didn't raise it, didn't brandish it. I simply held it steady, the way you hold a truth no one else can deny. I stopped halfway to the empty chair marked majority shareholder. I didn't sit. Instead, I stood beside it, silent, my eyes never leaving Adrienne. The effect was immediate. Her face paled and her words collapsed into nervous muttering. She gripped the table as though it might steady her. But the room had already turned. Every eye was on me now, waiting not for her, but for me. And still I waited. I let the silence stretch until it became unbearable, until even the sound of someone shifting in their seat felt deafening. The anticipation was a weapon, and I wielded it carefully. In that suspended moment, Adrienne realized the truth. Power wasn't in shouting or grand declarations. Power was in the calm presence of the one person who didn't need to say a word. At last, I lowered myself into the chair at the far end of the table, the one reserved for the majority shareholder. The leather creaked softly beneath me, but the sound carried like a verdict through the boardroom. Every eye followed me as though the act of sitting was itself a declaration of war. I placed the manila envelope Adrienne had once pushed across the desk onto the table in front of me, its edges worn from my grip. Then, with a voice calm but cutting, I broke the silence. "I do not accept the decision to terminate my employment," I said. The words were steady, measured, each syllable striking harder than any raised voice could have. Adrienne lurched forward, color rising in her cheeks. "This is outrageous," she barked. "He has no standing here." He was dismissed under my authority. "Your authority?" I interrupted gently, letting the words linger like frost. "That authority ends where ownership begins." The room tensed. Directors exchanged glances, torn between habit and the shifting tide before them. Adrienne pounded the table, desperate now. "The board has no obligation to recognize this. You're undermining everything we've built." Before she could continue, one of the senior directors, a man who had remained quiet throughout the meeting, leaned back in his chair and folded his arms. His voice was clear, deliberate. "For the record," he said, "I vote with Cameron." The effect was immediate. Another director nodded, almost in relief, then another. The dominoes fell, not with fanfare, but with the quiet certainty of people realizing the storm had passed and they no longer needed to cling to the wrong shelter. Adrienne's face drained of its triumph. She looked around, eyes darting, searching for allies. None returned her gaze. I reached into my pocket and withdrew the silver pen, its weight familiar, its surface glinting under the fluorescent lights. Slowly, deliberately, I placed it on the table. "This pen," I said softly, "was given to me by Theodore Hartwell when I signed the documents transferring ownership. It represents trust, continuity, and it represents the will of the company's founder, which does not die because one woman calls me old infrastructure." I leaned forward, sliding a document across the table with a smooth motion. I signed my name, the pen scratching against paper like the closing of a circle. The sound was soft, but in that room it was louder than any gavel. For the first time in days, I felt the weight in my chest lift. Liberation came not with shouting or revenge, but with the quiet satisfaction of balance restored. I hadn't just defended myself. I had claimed what was mine. Adrienne sank back into her chair, defeated. The board no longer looked at her. Their eyes were on me. The room held its breath as I finished signing the document. The silver pen rested in my hand for a moment longer before I set it down with finality. Then I looked straight at Adrienne, who sat pale and cornered at the other end of the table. From this moment forward, I said evenly, "You will report directly to me." A ripple spread through the boardroom. Some directors sat straighter, others exchanged looks of visible relief. The tension that had pressed down on the room for days finally broke. One director exhaled so heavily it almost sounded like a laugh. Another began to clap, and soon a handful joined, hesitant at first, then firm. The sound echoed off the walls, not thunderous applause, but the kind that spoke of people grateful to see justice restored. Adrienne's jaw tightened, but she no longer protested. The weight of silence around her made it clear she was finished. I picked up the silver pen again, holding it between my fingers as the light glinted off its engraved surface. A small smile curved across my lips. "This company doesn't need showmen," I said quietly, letting the words hang in the air. "It needs guardians." The board nodded, the meaning settling into their bones. For them it was closure. For me it was triumph, not loud or vengeful, but steady, undeniable, and just. As I gathered my papers, the pen slid easily back into my pocket, right where it belonged. Liberation wasn't about erasing the past. It was about proving that sacrifice still mattered, that loyalty wasn't a relic, and that integrity could outlast arrogance. For the first time in a long while, I walked out of a boardroom not as an employee, not as a scapegoat, but as the rightful steward of what I had built. And the look on Adrienne's face, that hollow recognition of defeat, was more satisfying than any speech I could have made. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. It arrives quietly, with calm hands and steady resolve. If you enjoyed this story about never judging someone by their appearance and how patience can be the most powerful weapon of all, hit that like button and leave a comment letting me know what you think. And if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell to get updates on new stories just like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.
They say just forget. Move on like it's easy. But forgetting you feels like remembering someone I've never seen. I've been trying to erase you from the places in my mind, but the harder that I fight it, the more you're hard to leave behind. Every memory keeps slipping through the cracks I try to close, like a face I should remember, but somehow never know. Forgetting you feels impossible, like chasing something I can't hold, like trying to remember someone that I've never even known. I keep reaching through the silence for a past I can't undo, 'cause letting go of what we had feels like losing something true. Every moment turns to fragments, every thought just fades to blue, like I'm searching for a feeling that still only leads to you. Forgetting you feels impossible, like chasing something I can't hold, like trying to remember someone that I've never even known. I keep reaching through the silence for a past I can't undo, 'cause letting go of what we had feels like losing something true. If I never met you, maybe I would know just how to heal. But now every empty moment still reminds me what is real. Forgetting you feels impossible, like chasing something I can't hold, like trying to remember someone that I've never even known. I keep reaching through the silence 'cause letting go of what we had feels like losing something true. I'm freezing, I'm bleeding, slowly fading away. But don't worry, I'm fine. The cold has settled in my heartbeat, like winter living in my veins. Every breath feels numb and fragile, every smile just hides the pain. I'm breaking quietly in silence, falling slow without a sound. Yet I keep saying I'm okay, while my world burns to the ground. I'm frozen here, I'm bleeding slowly, dying piece by piece inside. But I still whisper, it's alright, just to keep you from goodbye. I'm shattered, love, but don't you worry, I'll pretend till my last breath. Even while my soul is fading, I'll say everything's okay. Maybe pain just learned to live here, maybe sorrow feels like home. So I wear my wounds like armor and survive them all alone. I'm frozen here, I'm bleeding slowly, dying piece by piece inside. But I still whisper, it's alright, just to keep you from goodbye. I'm shattered, love, but don't you worry, I'll pretend till my last breath. Even while my soul is fading, I'll say everything's okay. If you ever see me smiling, know it's just my last defense. 'Cause sometimes love means hiding how much you're suffering. No, I'm frozen here, I'm bleeding slowly, dying piece by piece inside. But I still whisper, it's alright, just to keep you from goodbye. I'm shattered, love, but don't you worry, I'll pretend till my last breath. Even while my soul is fading, I'll say everything's okay. It's okay.